So this is your second time in 4 years running for council.
Yep.
And now that we're kind of more than mid-campaign, at least for the primary, I'm curious in what you've done different and what it's been like this time.
It's been very different this time. The biggest difference is actually having a real chance, and having expectations of a lot of people to step up and be the voice of change. Last time when I got involved, when Shannon and Lisa kind of joined the race, they were the two semis going down the freeway, and the rest of us were sort of drafting behind them. And whenever I would talk to people, I would get Phil, I really like you, and I love your ideas, but I've known Lisa forever, or I've known Shannon forever. And so there was this sort of foregone conclusion that it was the two of them fighting it out. Whereas this time, with Shannon not in the race, and with the current city council really quite embattled, and a lot of people wanting change, the difference is now, oh, hey, Phil, you've been around for 4 years. I see you all over the place. You're involved with this and this and that. And so, on the one hand, it's a lot easier because I'm having better conversations. People want to donate money. People want to volunteer and get involved. But then there is that flip side of the expectations where the business owners that are supporting me, they're like, hey, we, go out and do more and get this and go farther. And so it's a lot more meetings, a lot more time. Luckily, my son is 7 years old this time instead of 3, so that makes it a little easier. And he loves doorbelling with me, and he enjoys going out. But yeah, it's just, there's a lot more stress, a lot more pressure, and especially since the number of people I come across who really just want change is amazing. And it's a very different attitude than it was last time with new districts, an open race, so many candidates. And so, yeah, it's been very different this time.
Yeah, we'll talk more about change and what change could mean in a few questions. But you mentioned the business, and that's something that you've spoken about a lot more. Mm-hmm. Plus, you recently got the case endorsement.
Yep.
What does that mean to you?
I mean, it means that the people who represent the economic engine in this city, and specifically in District 1, they want someone that understands what it means to run a business, that it's not easy, that if you own a business, you're not rich, and that supporting them so that they can grow, they can hire more people, they can give back to the community, someone who actually understands those elements is what's needed. And whether, the nice thing is a lot of it really has been the small businesses in District 1, Husky Deli and Easy Street and, Tallarico's and Peel and Press and, just sort of all over the place. Those business owners really would like someone who will listen to them and work with them as opposed to saying, no, you're just a business owner. You need to pay your fair share and move on. And I like it because one of the things I think is important is we have to work on more public-private partnerships in this city. I think that's one of the ways that we're going to raise more money. I think it's one of the ways that we're going to be able to solve some of our problems. And you can't do that if you're antagonistic to business. Whereas I say, talk to me. I mean, I'm willing to talk to anybody.
So Lisa Herbold, one of her major talking points is that business owners from the U District came directly to her for help. Since you're plugged into the business community, can you tell us what the West Seattle business community's meetings with her have been like and what were the outcomes?
I mean, the only things I really know is that they don't feel that they really get heard.
But have they approached her? Did they get those kind of meetings?
I believe so. I think there have been several meetings where they've sat down. I don't know when the last time. I know last year a group of restaurant owners sat down with her. And I know one of the things, I remember hearing one of the questions was, asked of Lisa, what have you done for us? And one of the responses was, well, we haven't raised taxes on you, as opposed to what are the positive things, what is coming with the increased business license fee? What is she doing in terms of helping them being able to employ more people and expand their businesses and things like that? And so what I've heard is that it's just they kind of, things fall on deaf ears, that when they talk about their problems, down on Avalon with the construction down there, that project had been set up for a long time, and yet Lisa's office didn't look into it until after the construction started right in front of those businesses, and they were really suffering. And I saw, like Dan Austin at Peel and Press put out several Facebook posts about, hey, come down, patronize these businesses, help out, they're really struggling. And I know Lisa's post was, well, hey, you can park under the bridge and get your steps. And when I talk to those business owners, what I hear is that there isn't the type of outreach of what can we do to mitigate this effect on you? What can we do to help you out through this tough time? And I know, like the Shack, there's the possibility that they could end up closing because they're about to lose a lot of parking around there, and this has been a very tough time for them. And I kind of feel, especially, the businesses that have been around for a while and really paid into the city, they deserve having someone who's going to find ways to help them more than is currently happening. So I see just a situation where, Lisa and a lot of the current council aren't there to hear what they can do to help as much as they come out and say what they want in return for the things that they need. And the business owners just, it's not helpful. It's not helpful to have a city council that spends more time focusing on how to increase their fees than how to help them promote prosperity, which is, one of the things in the preamble of our city charter is promote prosperity. It's not put more and more pressure on those businesses to produce for the city.
So some of the things then that the council has passed, what would you roll back then? There's been a lot of worker protections. This past week there was a protection for hotel workers. There's been sick, family leave, all sorts of things. The $15 minimum wage. What there is oppressive to business, and what should maybe be looked at for rollback?
Well, so I don't necessarily think a lot of things come to mind that I would specifically start with rolling back. I know with the hotel thing, one of the things I saw was a requirement of keeping on, if a hotel changes hands, is, the keeping on the staff that's currently there and not being able to change that staff over for a fairly significant period of time. And I understand protecting the people that had worked there, and when the business changes hands, not having them lose their job. But that also kind of ties the hand of a business that maybe if the job's not getting done right and there needs to be new people, that it should be the choice of the people coming in that purchased the place to be able to put their people in. And I don't really think it's a city's place to mandate things like that. Like with that also, I know there was the question of the square footage that someone who is doing, cleaning work in a hotel, the maximum amount of square footage that they're allowed to clean in a period of time for their, when they're on schedule. And so on the one hand, that actually sounds good because, you don't want a situation where the employer can put way too much pressure on someone to work far too hard for the money they make. But again, I also wonder if that's the necessary thing for a city to be doing. Protecting people against sexual harassment, that's fantastic. Those protections are good. But some of the ones that are more sort of economically based and business based, I don't know if that's the place of the city. Such as that, like what I was saying with respect to, saying that you can't replace those workers for, I think it was 120 or 180 days if I saw, just because that's, if someone's hired to come in and turn around a business, one of the things they're going to do is they're going to try to find the inefficiencies. And if they need people, they should have the wherewithal to make those changes, and it shouldn't be legislated that they can't make those hiring changes. Think like the business tax was another one, the business license fee was another one. I remember when it came out, there was absolutely no outreach from the city to the businesses, and here's this increase, and you're going to get 3 increases over a series of time. And one of the things was it was supposed to be for increased police in the city, and we haven't seen the money go towards that. And also I know Lisa at the first forum talked about the fact that, only the top 15% of businesses are affected by that. However, that, I think the minimum was $300,000 in gross profit. And the fact is just about any bar or restaurant's going to top that amount without being a big business. And so for me, that's really not understanding, how business works in terms of your gross profit, your net profit, and the fact that a lot of businesses generate a lot of revenue, but they don't make a lot of profit. So for that, let's see, I'm just trying to think what other ones directly come to mind. I think those are the ones that jump to me now. I know when the $15 an hour minimum wage came up, I felt bad because I had heard that one of the things Mayor Murray at the time wanted to do was set a training wage. So you could have, like teenagers coming in and working, and that wouldn't be under the $15 an hour minimum wage, but a different wage standard, because I recognize the need for people to earn a living wage, but it's really hurt employers being able to hire young people and bring them in for a summer job. I know talking to Jack Miller at Husky Deli, with not having a different type of training wage you could do for a teenage worker, it's harder for him to hire the same number of kids to come in and do the ice cream scooping job that he's done forever. So there are a lot of things like that where I feel that the decisions that have been made by council haven't been made in conjunction with the business community, and asking them, what are the things we can do to get where we want to go in terms of generating revenue for the city, but what are the things we can do to help you as a business expand and grow?
So let me tie two things and we'll move on from this subject.
Well, no, actually, I have another question.
Okay, go ahead.
Which is on that particular subject. So is your view more that the city should be more hands-off, or in that last thing that you said, what specifically then should the city do if they should at least take some actions to help businesses? What has gone undone that maybe they're asking for, or they've even talked to you about?
So it really is that reaching out before things are done. That's one of the biggest things. Like before, a new fee, a new tax, before something like that comes out to the businesses, doing a better job of speaking to a wide range of businesses, small to large, different types of owners, different locales, different types of industries, to just get a better sense of what's going to be that impact and does it help? Because, just necessarily finding a way to put more protections in place, that's great for people who need that. But, like, for example, I talked to a couple of restaurants that the Office of Labor Standards came out, they put the wage theft posters all around and interviewed everybody, and, done it to some businesses that have been around for 20, 30 years without ever having any problem at all. I mean, businesses that have given back to the community, and when the Office of Labor Standards leave, having some people working there saying, "Hey, boss, we see this poster. You're stealing our wages. What's going on?" And the owner having to explain, no, I'm not stealing your wages. This is just to warn that these are the things that could happen. And there's this feeling that it's making an assumption that the business is going to do the wrong thing, that it's putting pressure, on the business, coming out there and saying, like, you shouldn't be doing this, this is terrible, as opposed to what I'd like to see is be supportive of the business up front, and anyone that breaks those rules, you need to come down on them like a ton of bricks so it never happens again. Like one of the things I was talking to the Northwest Carpenters about, prevailing wages, and when you've got a project where they're not paying prevailing wages and people are getting underpaid, the fines to the businesses and the developers and the contractors that are responsible for underpaying, it's really pretty nominal. There isn't teeth in it. And, in fact, you can have 4, 5, and 6 different times where you're fined for this, and the fines go from, $1,000 per incident all the way up to, I think it was 20 or 50,000 per incident. But in my opinion, at some point, you just cut it off and say, you can't do business here anymore if you continue to do this. And so I'd rather see the assumption that our businesses with a track record of doing nothing wrong are left alone to conduct their business their way. But if you break the rules, that's where I want to see enforcement stronger and harder and swifter. And so I just, I don't think the way it's been done is appropriate. It's been more in creating this administrative, not really a nightmare, but just spending a lot of money on the administrative side, pointing a finger and saying, you bad business owner, you need to do better by your employees. When most of the people I know, especially around here, are amazing to their employees. They help them out when they're in trouble. They make sure they've got their time. They make sure they have time off when they need it. They get them the shifts. And, I see business owners that try very hard to support and help the people that work for them. And it feels like the city just doesn't make the assumption that that's going to be where they start.
So again, tying two things together on this subject. Earlier you mentioned Shannon Braddock. Mm-hmm. And of course you also mentioned your case endorsement.
Right.
Which is an endorsement from a business group that is not based in West Seattle.
Yes.
Virtually all the mailings regarding both of her campaigns near the end said that she was going to be influenced unduly by business influences outside the neighborhood.
Right.
What's your strategy with dealing with those kind of mailings?
I mean, look, so there's sort of two parts to that. One, I sent out my questionnaires and went to the interviews for everybody that was looking for endorsements. I mean, the Stranger, the Times, the Carpenters, everybody out there. And you go to these meetings and they endorse the people that they feel match up with their desires. I was asked in one meeting, how do I feel about being labeled as the business candidate and as being backed by businesses? And my feeling is that's fantastic. I mean, they're the economic engines for our city. Shouldn't you want to work with them and help them be a part of the city? That their prosperity should be prosperity that's felt by everybody in the city. And you can't do that if you're at odds with them. And in terms of setting up a situation where it says you've been endorsed by business and they're going to unduly influence you, I mean, unfortunately, there are things on the other side. Like things. There were groups out there where I reached out multiple times saying, "Hey, I'd like to meet you and talk to you about your process." And then they endorsed Lisa without ever responding, without ever coming back. And I talked to Brendan and Jesse actually about this at different times too, where we found that there were different groups that were just endorsing and supporting without ever talking to us, finding out if maybe our feelings and what we were aligned with them. And so the fact that the Downtown Chamber of Commerce and CASE endorsed me, I'm proud that they endorsed me because they think I'm someone that they can work with. And I mean, $250 is the maximum donation that anybody can make. So, it's not like there's a situation where they're trying to buy anything from me because...
Well, the independent expenditures, though.
Right, and those can happen. I don't have any say over those.
Right.
And in fact, luckily, I mean, that's the whole point. I mean, the campaign does the campaign work. And if there are people out there that want to support me by doing other things, they can. Look, if a group came up and started supporting me that I disagreed with, I would disavow the support, But in terms of saying no to, like if Tim Burgess and his group did something for me, I'm not going to say that's a bad thing. I have tremendous respect for him, and I have tremendous respect for what he's doing. With CASE, if they do something in this race supportive of me, I mean, Lisa's going to have people that support her doing the same thing. And to that end, that's the way politics functions, is the people who think the candidates are the type of candidates that they want in office, they support them. And right now, with so many people looking for change, looking for moderation, looking for just a calm, reasonable head that just wants to efficiently and effectively deliver services to the people, those groups, if they support me, that's great. I mean, I continue to go out and look for that support. And it's like, when I went to the Stranger in the Seattle Times and we had those interviews, those are two very different groups in how they feel and what they believe. But I certainly want to talk to everybody. And if someone endorses me because they like who I am as a candidate, then I'm typically going to be proud to say that. But I would always be on the lookout for a group that I disagreed with and what the things they would say. But it's a very complicated process. And so, it's like, I mean, one of the other interesting things is, everybody wants to take money out of politics. And, a lot of people talk about that you want the influence of money gone. But what I love is the media still has one metric, and it's how much money have you raised. And so like I'll read an article in The Stranger about wanting to get money out of politics and how the voucher program helps do that. And yet I'm, for a while I was an unviable candidate because I hadn't raised enough money. And so it's funny how you talk on one hand that we got to get rid of money, but then on the other hand, that's the one metric that everybody bases viability as a candidate.
It's only because it's easy. It's easy to get that information. That's the only reason why, trust me.
Oh, true. No, but the problem is it's still pushed out there. So it's still used, and it's not even tempered with a sense of, well, we know this is the one thing we actually can measure, so we'll say it. But it's still, it's two hands that are, talking very differently about the same issue. So, I mean, look, that's part of running. You look for individuals to support you, you look for groups to endorse you, and you look to find a connection with people about what it is you want to do as a candidate and what the people in the community are looking for.
So speaking of change, on the subject, once we get past the vote count, at some point in August, who knows? Could be after the first night. Could take the entire 3 weeks or so to finish counting if it's close. There will be 2 people left out of this 3.
Yes.
So let's say that it's you and Brendan Colding.
Okay.
Politics is tough, and nobody ever wants to say anything bad about anybody. But why should it not be him? If it was him, it would be changed too. So
right.
Why should it not be him?
Well, I mean, between the two of us, and Brendan and I get along tremendously well. And in fact, actually at the Morgan Community Festival, we found out that our kids get along really well also. I mean, look, the difference is, Brendan and I, what's fascinating in all the forums, we talk about public safety. And, we both have a take on the police in Seattle and how better to support them, and that they're sort of a big piece in cleaning up the city of Seattle. And I would say the difference is my background for the last 15 years as a public defender and being a pro tem district court judge, that I've got a full understanding of the criminal justice system. You know, it's the prosecutor, the police, the defense attorney, the judges, probation, the jail, whereas Brendan's experience is specifically within just from the police department. And so I think to that extent, one of our biggest issues with public health and public safety comes an understanding of all the nuances of that. And so what I would say in terms of just differentiating the two of us is that my understanding from the criminal justice standpoint is a little bit broader than his from just the law enforcement standpoint. And I also think that just over the last 25 years, I've had a broader range of experiences than he has. You know, having been a teacher, having been a business owner, having been, you know, worked and lived abroad and lived in other cities, you know, and then what I've done, you know, as a lawyer over the last 15 years and a lot of my community volunteer work, I think I just have, you know, I mean, I'm 10 years older than he is, and I think I've got that extra decade of experience. And so I would say as much as I think he is a very good candidate and a good man, that I have a little more than what we need right now.
He's been a teacher too.
Yes, he was.
Yeah. So aside from, I don't want to spend a whole lot of time talking about homelessness only because that's been discussed. It's been discussed with questions everybody's asked at every forum that we've covered so far. But there is one question
Yes.
that's very West Seattle specific. Do you think that Camp Second Chance should stay, should be kept running, or disbanded?
So I got to say, I went and visited Camp Second Chance. You know, I saw the things that Tomas was doing. I talked to Eric Davis. I talked to a lot of people that live there. And I got to say, I was impressed with a lot of what they're doing. I mean, you know, you talk about a place where you're giving people hope, you're giving people a sense of community, you know, you're building real small houses. You know, it's not just tough sheds, it's not shacks. You know, they really are trying to make something there. And now, on the one hand, there are community issues where the city said, hey, you know, we would like you to accept having this here, and in exchange, there are going to be some improvements you're going to see in your community. You're going to see a roundabout and some, you know, help in the business district and sidewalks and, you know, more police protection. And so I know I was at the Highland Park Action Committee when it was discussed whether or not to extend their lease, and I heard those two sides. You know, the people that said, please let us stay. This is something that's helping us. We want to transition to a better place, but this is giving us a sense of community and hope that we haven't had. And then the people who talk about, you know, finding human waste in their yard and needles in their yard and seeing people walking through the woods who are homeless and stolen cars getting dropped off. You know, so I hear the people in the community who have an issue with it, but I also see in Camp Second Chance people that will call the police when they see something weird going on, that I think they're trying to be good stewards of that property. And so it is a very complex situation there where I support the things that are happening, and I think actually the city could do more to help them. I mean, I know one of the things I heard about was that one of the people before Lehigh that was overseeing that encampment actually embezzled a significant six-figure amount of money, and nothing was ever done to that person. You know, so I see something where the city could probably do more to help and support and be a better partner to Camp Second Chance. But I understand what the people in the community are saying. So the one thing that I'm actually trying to get a little bit more involved in understanding is if they're going to be there and they're going to be a successful and a respectful, you know, partner with the people who live around there, what needs to happen? Do we just need to change perception? Do we need to, you know, add more support? You know, I know Eric was saying that, you know, if they increase their size by too much, they would have to add security, because one of the things they do is they take turns walking the perimeter, which is fantastic, but he feels like they're sort of right at that level. But, you know, I could see actually a fairly beautiful community of wonderful small houses, you know, connected with walkways, having a pea patch, doing, you know, natural stewardship stuff with the wetlands in there, you know, having better common space, having more access to services. You know, I have a friend of mine who lives in Vietnam, and right now he lives in a community that looks so much like that. You know, 45 little houses where people hang out together, they have a life together, they work together, and it's respectful for the people in their community and around. And so I don't necessarily see that model as being bad. I could see it being incredibly good, and I see very positive things happening. I just know that you have to find a way to make that balance between the people who are upset that they feel that it attracts a bad influence and it's a negative impact on the community, and then the people who go and volunteer and help and give who really don't, who just see the positive side of it. So I like a lot of the things that are happening there, and I know we need to look a lot more closely into, is that the right spot? Could we grow it? Do you put it somewhere else? Because I know when I first heard of, how much money it would cost to take all of that and move it somewhere else, that seems like a waste of money. But then again, I also know the community, there were a lot of promises made to it that haven't been followed through, and so it's not necessarily the city's place to just say, well, you're going to accept this regardless of if it's what you want. So I don't know. It's complex, but I see a lot of things there that I think are pretty good.
So you don't have a stay or go decision?
I mean, at this point, it's there right now. The lease got extended, and it's going to be there for a little while. So at this point, I'd like to spend some time talking to the people in community who really didn't like that decision to find out why and if there's things that can mitigate that. And if there is somehow a better place for it to be able to be moved to that would, have a more welcoming community or have more space or there'd be more resources, I think that's reasonable. But I would say right now, it's there. So I don't certainly, support just picking it up and moving it, because that doesn't seem like the right choice right now. But I do want to respect the people who live there and listen to them. So it's hard. I know I'm sort of dancing around on that because I'm just not quite sure, other than let's live with what we have right now and let's make it the best as we can for the people there and the people around it.
Tiny house villages in general, this certainly isn't the only one that the city supports.
No. Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's sort of what I was saying is I can see an ideal in a tiny house village that could work beautifully. I know there is, where was it? It's up in the central district, like around like the 23rd Union area. One of the neighborhood groups I was going into the church there, right next door, they've got one. And that seems like it's set up really well, and that it's going nicely. I need to do more to look at the other ones in other districts to see how things are going. But I can see it as a model that if it's done right and supported well, that it could be a good housing option. Certainly not with, like I said, very substandard buildings, but if you've got a real small house, I mean, it's not so much different than the ADUs and DADUs that are going to be around. That I don't see why they couldn't work together in a little village. But again, I'm in the process of trying to figure out what works and what doesn't.
So affordable housing in general.
Yeah.
Hall and mandatory housing affordability. Where are you on that?
I'm at the fact that the in lieu of fees are too low, and that if a neighborhood takes the development and money gets paid into the in lieu of fee and doesn't get the included affordable housing, that there needs to be some sort of right of first refusal, or where that money stays in that neighborhood, or at least for a significant period of time can be used in that neighborhood first. What I don't like is the idea that one neighborhood takes a building, the developer pays the in lieu of fee, and the in lieu of fee goes to a not-for-profit developer to build something in some other part of town. Because I think the point is that when you have that in development with the increased height limits and the increased zoning, that you're going to get affordable housing for it. So I think that's something that absolutely needs to be revisited, because I don't think those fees are high enough, and we're not getting the development of the affordable housing where you want it.
Are there any other things that we should be doing that you believe in terms of affordable housing, aside from maybe fixing MHA?
Well, I do think that we do need to do more in terms of identifying older places that are currently affordable, but that in the next couple of years could very easily be targets to be sold and to be, torn down and changed. Because one of the things that happens is when you build something new, it's not going to be cheaper than the thing that was there. I know a friend of mine lives in an apartment building on California where the owners are, I think they're in their late 80s, and the people in the building are really kind of scared because if they pass away, their children don't live here, and it would be really hard for them not to sell to a developer who would put something up that's not affordable. And so all of a sudden, there's a ton of affordable units gone. So I know, like, one of the things I saw in one of the Hollow recommendations was incentivizing landlords to keep rents affordable and find ways to not raise rents as much as they can, and to be allowing people to stay in those affordable units. So protecting the affordable stock now is, I think, a huge thing. And also, I think finding ways to maybe work with some of the not-for-profit developers to be able to build faster and more affordably, so we could potentially add, literally more affordable units, not just some of the tinier units that are selling at a lower price, which really, in my opinion, aren't necessarily livable. But I think we need to explore that more. But the biggest one for me is protecting some of the older stock that actually still is affordable and keep it that way.
So displacement.
Yes. Yeah, well, I mean, that's another thing. Like, MHA, the Race and Social Justice team actually told the city council that they were concerned that you would have, communities of elderly and immigrants and people of color who are going to be displaced because the MHA is going to allow people to come in and want to build. And so the places that are currently good and affordable are going to get torn down for new development. And so I think, there is an element of MHA which doesn't protect those people in a way that I think it was supposed to.
One thing that's going to come up related to all that, almost certainly in the next council term, is potentially ending single-family zoning.
Right.
Where do you stand on that?
I don't see a need to just end it. I don't see why you can't have all of those things living together, single family and low rise and, multiplexes and larger buildings. I grew up in a single family home. I had a lot of friends who did, and, I see places where you should still be able to, if you're whatever, a single person, a couple, a family, what have you. I don't see why there can't be single family housing. I know we have to plan for density increases, and in fact, I think we actually need to do more to plan for greater density within the hearts of our urban villages, and also I think we need to look more at a downtown that's a 24-hour downtown that you could build more, have more people. But I don't see why, sort of as you go farther out, you can't still have single-family housing. Nobody has given me a reason why you need to just destroy it or get rid of single-family housing everywhere. It feels like it should be able to coexist with all the other modes of housing.
So we asked this question in the last interview. Do you feel the urbanists have too much sway over the city?
Too much sway is, I don't know really how you completely measure it. I think their voice is very loud. I think anytime someone says, I don't mind single-family housing, you just instantly get called a NIMBY, you get called, an anti-density person. So they have a loud and strong voice, and to some extent they are correct about the fact that we have to plan for more density. But I don't think it's a fair thing for them to be able to just shout down a voice just because it sounds like someone is talking about something that seems privileged or like I said, not in my backyard kind of thing. So maybe they do have us, I don't know. I guess thinking about it, I would say their voice is loud and maybe gets paid attention to, unequally with some of the other voices. But, right now, over the affordability housing issue across this city, it's so contentious on so many levels. I know people have said that I'm anti-density. Just because, I did work with Scale because the Morgan Community Association voted to join and I'm the vice president, so I ended up involved. And I try to tell people I'm not. I lived in New York City. I loved that experience, and I see Seattle growing and booming, and we need to plan for that type of thing with mass transit tied to housing. But it doesn't mean that you can't have more suburban areas within Seattle still. That it doesn't just have to be changed overnight into one giant urban block. So, maybe that's the long way of saying that they may have a little bit of a loud voice that I think has a little too much sway right now. But, every voice should be heard.
Yeah. Name one thing that the current council has done right.
Let's see. Well, declaring an emergency with homelessness was certainly, I think a smart thing to do. Let's see what they have done right beyond that. The fact that we've got the purple line back on, the environmental impact statement for West Seattle, although that's more about all of the electeds than just the council. The city's not burning. It's like when people talk about, Seattle is just completely falling apart, I would say that's not true. But yeah, I can't really point to any tremendous victories of the council recently.
So one way or another, unless all three incumbents get elected, there'll be at least 5 newbies, could be 7, when the council adjourns, rather convenes after the election.
Yeah.
Let's say you're one of them. How do you get anything done while everybody's learning on the job?
Well, I mean, one thing is right after the election, we have time to sit down and talk. We have a time, the new people can all start getting on the same page. And also, I mean, a lot of the candidates, I mean, I've talked to a lot of them already about the fact that we all see the need for change. We all need to see, we all see the value of, sort of moderation and trying to work with people and instead of against them. So I think that desire as a group for Seattle to do better, because you could just say most of the people running are just people from this city that just want it to function better. And so I think to that end, we're going to all be on that path of wanting to fix what we've seen gone wrong, specifically over the last 4 years. So it's always difficult, when you got a new group and whatever the politics are and whatever got you elected is, that's the path you're going to follow to. But what I sense is people that want the same kind of change. Helping the people who need help, making the city safer and more productive, ending the divisive politics. And I see an agreement on those things. So I think if as a group we all do agree on that, I think it's just a sense that, okay, here's the next 4 years. This is now what we need to do to step up to make the city run better for the people around us. So I think it's doable. I mean, I don't think there's, such differences in ideology that you'd end up with a new group fighting. I think you'd be able to have a new group that's going to look for a new way to work together and make the city, a little more proud of who's running it.
Regarding the people who need help, which you just mentioned, obviously we've talked about businesses, and then obviously there's people who are living unhoused who need help. Who else needs help that you think that the city could help with if you're elected?
I mean, the two biggest issues are people with undiagnosed and untreated mental health disorders, that many of them are living on the street now because also they are, self-medicating those issues, and it's becoming a substance abuse issue. And so especially what I see in the courts and I see with people who are my clients as a public defender, that they're not getting help. We have too much of a medical model in terms of treatment for substance abuse instead of a community-based model. And I've talked to some people who have worked in other states, like in California, where they've had actually some really successful community-based models for substance abuse treatment. But it's those people. It's people who really are in need, and you read a story about girls getting trafficked out of a tent encampment, and yet nothing seems to change that. There isn't any massive push to just end that. Families living on the street. You got Mary's Place is doing an amazing job each year with their No Child Sleeps Outside. But as a city, I find it unconscionable that we've let this go on so long, that we've got people living on a street where we shouldn't have that. There's too much money in this city and too much will between the people and, even the politicians, that I don't see where we failed there, other than we're not supporting the service providers that are doing a good job, and we're putting too much money behind service providers that don't prove that they're actually doing a good job. So I really want to do more to help people who are having issues with mental health disorders and substance abuse disorders, because we're clearly not doing a good job with that.
Is there another constituency, though, of people that need help in general with something that you see?
I think the elderly, maybe I've just used the wrong word, but, so I was president of the West Side Neighbors Network, which one of the big things there was finding ways for people to be able to age in place and to be able to stay where they live. When I hear about someone, there was a woman I was talking to the other day who, her husband, his parents passed away, and they left them their house, and they literally can't afford to take the house that he had grown up in, that the parents had bought and paid for because of the property taxes. And so they're not able to just live in the house that they had owned. And you got a lot of problems with people getting forced out in terms of they get older, they're on a fixed income, and they can't afford to stay where they are. And I think the city needs to look at that a little bit more and be a little bit kinder and more helpful in terms of understanding that as you get older, things don't get easier. You're not necessarily getting more money. There has to be more support, more community support about people being able to help each other out. So I definitely think that our aging population in Seattle needs a lot more focus than they're getting right now.
You mentioned taxes. Obviously, not all are control of the city. Some are. Are there any specific city-related taxes that you think should be rolled back or scaled back?
Well, the soda tax, I think should be rolled back. I mean, number one, for the council to have stated that they should tax the sugary sodas instead of the diet sodas because somehow they're less healthy, that's just wrong. I mean, from a nutrition and a scientific standpoint, diet sodas are a whole lot worse than the sugary sodas. Should we be drinking less? Yeah. I mean, sodas in general are not good for people. But the way they went about that, it's a regressive tax. The fact that it ended up generating $2 million more than they thought, that just says to me that it really hit people who are already having issues with the amount of money they have. And I just, the way that it impacted restaurants with the fact that for a long time they would make money off the fact that they had their sodas so they could keep other items on their menus cheaper. But now the soda tax means they have to raise that price and they lose the ability to keep some of the food costs down because they got to raise the cost of soda to pay for that. So that was one of those ones where the council, I don't think, thought holistically, and I don't think did a really good job of thinking it through entirely. So that's something I think should be repealed. Other than that, I want to do a bigger look at all of the levies that we've had, the ones that are coming up that are expiring, because there's going to be an instant desire to just turn around and re-up those to get that money coming through again. And I think before we do that, we need to take a look and see where our money's being spent now and what we're getting from it, and are there inefficiencies within the system where we could repair that to cover some of the costs rather than just doing another levy or adding another tax to the mix. So, I still need to look through and see what money's coming in on what taxes and what we're getting for it. So one of the interesting ones is from the sale of marijuana. I still haven't really, when I talk sort of loosely with people, nobody I know has been, publishing how much has come for that and where has it gone. Has it gone to education? Has it gone to the places it was supposed to go? And I haven't seen those numbers yet. And obviously, you can do public disclosure requests and find it out, and we eventually will. But I'm curious to see, where that tax money has been spent, and has it been spent effectively? So.
One question we're asking each of you is about the annexation of White Center should it come up again.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing we always get is it's up to the people who live there. So let's start the question from this direction.
Mm-hmm.
If you lived in the unincorporated area, would you vote to be annexed to Seattle?
Right now, no. I mean, knowing a lot of people that live in White Center, I think they'd be much happier getting annexed by Burien than they would by Seattle.
But they voted almost 80% against that.
Right. No. I'm sort of jokingly saying that from the standpoint of some of the people that I've talked to. I mean, I haven't talked to more than 100 people who were there. So what I would say is, again, that really should be up to the people in White Center, because obviously it's going to have a huge impact on their taxes. If people want to start businesses, what it's going to do. If they want to build onto their houses, it's going to have a huge difference as to where they sort of end up. Right now they're kind of in a spot where they don't have to deal with those issues, and yeah, their services probably could be a little bit better. But yeah, that's a complex issue where at this point I still feel like it's the people of White Center who need to decide if they want to become part of Seattle or not.
Right, but is it something that the city should pursue?
Yeah.
Do you see any plus in it for the city to pursue? Because right now they're kind of not. It's sort of on the back burner.
Yeah, I mean, from the standpoint that, for a city, you always try to build your tax base. And I think also you should be looking at it that if the city would be improving the life of the people that lived in White Center, I think that's something the city should look to do and say, hey, we'd like to come in. We're going to improve these services. We're going to do this for you. Your life's going to be better in this way and that way. I know that's typically not the calculation that's done when it's, do we want to annex an area? Because it's really, are we adding more tax base than we're going to have to spend in services to take care of those people? So for me, just as a citizen, it's much more about the city should reach out and do that if they can help that area. But, obviously those aren't the things that go into the deciding factor with whether a city should push that. I mean, so the thing I've sort of gathered is right now the city is sort of, lukewarm on it because they don't know if it's, it's more of a cost or more of a benefit to the city. So maybe it's not the right time for them to be addressing it.
The folks in White Center have two major concerns. One is the King County Library, which they very much like. and also that their schools are in the Highline School District. Would you be in favor, should annexation come forward, of leaving that library to the county and the schools to Highline?
I don't see why not. I mean, from the standpoint, again, the real question should be, is Seattle going to add value? Is there something as a part of the city of Seattle that the city of Seattle could then do better? But if, as far as I know, the King County Library does a good job, the Highline school systems do a good job, and, it should be about who's getting the job done best. So if right now, if that's working, then that shouldn't be changed. If there are things Seattle could bring to the table that make it better, then absolutely. But it really, it's kind of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so I would see if if the annexation occurred, you take a look at that. You don't just wipe it clean. You just, you work within the region as well.
Speaking of large chunks of land, kind of a current thing that people are talking about, the West Seattle Golf Course. What do you think about its future?
I don't see why it shouldn't stay the way it is. I mean, the 4 municipal courses make a good amount of money for the city. The 5% that the parks take off the top is a huge chunk. They employ union labor. It is open space that is very low cost access to all sorts of communities. I know myself, my grandfather taught me how to play golf in Connecticut on a municipal golf course. I actually grew up on the backside of a college golf course, and I see benefit for that type of open space that's access to activity that provides money. I mean, they make money for the city. I mean, they work, it's not like at a loss. And my feeling is, if we were in a situation where we had, 100,000 homeless in the city of Seattle and there was no place to put them, that, I think you would have to look at places like golf courses to be able to add housing and do things like that. I don't think we're at that point. I think we can actually deal with this problem without saying, let's get rid of our golf courses. And it's mostly just because I think they do provide a lot more benefit to the community than this thought that they're, for the rich and privileged, because that's not what a municipal course is about. I don't see why you couldn't even potentially add some housing, down by the West Seattle Golf Course, in between where the stadium and the golf course is. Maybe you could put some housing there. But in general, I just don't see a need for it. I think it provides a benefit to the community. You're never going to replace it also. If you make that decision, it won't come back. So, if down the road you finally dealt with the housing crisis in Seattle and the homeless crisis in Seattle, you can't then all of a sudden turn around and say like, we'll bring back the golf course now. And also, obviously, I-42 says the city's got to replace it, acre for acre, which there's no room for that right now. So, my feeling is, if it was a necessity because the problem we faced was so large that was the only answer, that's what you would have to do. I don't see that.
Another jump around question. Transportation. Aside from light rail, what is West Seattle's #1 transportation issue at the moment, and what do you want to do about it?
Well, it's definitely still just getting on and off the peninsula, through the West Seattle Bridge. I mean, one of the things I'd love to see explored is adding a bus line on-ramp from the West Seattle Bridge to 99. I know members from the West Seattle Transportation Coalition actually years ago went and talked to the businesses down below underneath the West Seattle Bridge about how that would affect them. And what they saw is this is something that we absolutely could do. And so that's one thing that I think could really help. Obviously, one of the problems with it right now is, not having enough drivers, not having enough space for the maintenance areas for buses is kind of difficult, because we actually could add more buses, which would help, but I don't think right now the infrastructure is there. I'd love to see what we did while the bridge, or while the tunnel was being put in, during that period where we had the transport moving around West Seattle. That, I think, was great. I think that's something we should look at, because I think a lot of the buses that people take downtown get used a lot, obviously, by people just moving around West Seattle. And so if we could sort of change that dynamic, so you could have some of those, like with the 120 or with a C, where you're actually using them specifically getting people to downtown, and have other ways of moving people around West Seattle, would be really good. But so that's a huge thing. We need to look at. We need to find ways, right now before we get light rail for buses, bikes, and cars. I think to work more effectively together. And then I don't know if it's a transportation issue, but parking. Especially with downtown in the junction. Making sure that our free parking stays that way, and so it allows people to be able to get down there to park, to shop, to utilize that area. So I don't know if you really call that a transportation issue.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Parking is transportation related. I don't know where else I'd classify it.
No, it's true.
So, looking 5 years down the line, let's
Yes.
say your first term is ending.
Mm-hmm.
What's your vision for how Seattle will look like then, if you've been able to accomplish at least some of what you would hope to accomplish?
I would like to see each district having some sort of a larger community center that actually had emergency housing and temporary housing and services in it, as well as some sort of technology along the line of a Zoom room where you could actually interact with City Hall without having to go downtown. So you could actually go to a City Hall meeting or something like that within your district. I've talked to some people about this where I think that would be kind of a cool thing to add, to go back to sort of what Jim Deers had done years ago with the city with creating the town halls within the 13 districts. Something that brought community together a little bit more, something that was a hub. But I think now adding temporary and emergency housing and services to that, and police and fire would be great. Something like that in all of the districts is something I'd like to see happen. I'd like to see a police force that felt supported and able to do their job, while at the same time held accountable and having the transparency that I think we as the people deserve, but where it's transparency and accountability with respect to real issues of the police crossing the line, not, paperwork ends up to a week's suspension, or, getting someone off of the sidewalk leads to a situation where there's use of force statements because they just had to carry someone, but if someone is shot by a police officer, that there is true accountability and transparency in that process. But to have a police force that's actually proud to serve its city and to have leadership in both the council and the mayor's office that says thank you. Thank you for that job, for keeping the people safe, for protecting us, moving away from, enforce and punish to protect and serve again. And a city that's just not so divisive. My feeling is Seattle really can be the greenest and most technologically savvy city in the country. We have the people and the resources to do it, and I'd like to move that way. I'd like to have our schools reflect the fact that we have companies that are changing the face of this country and the planet, but we don't see it in this city. And I just want to see some more public-private partnerships so that you see these companies that make a lot of money here paying more back into this community to do more things. So a friendlier, a safer city, a city where people actually want to come here, where people aren't embarrassed to bring people here and show them the city. I mean, when I moved here 21 years ago, this was one of the cleanest, most amazing cities I had ever seen. And I was always proud to tell people I lived in Seattle. And I'm still proud to tell people I live in Seattle because I still love it here and I think it's fantastic. But I now meet hundreds of people who don't feel that way. And the fact is, we have too many people who feel that way about the city. And when we're not taking care of the people who are forced to live on the street, and we're not taking care of the people who actually live here and have lived here for a long time, we're disrespecting everybody. And so it's moving back in that direction. I would love to see 5 years from now, people saying, yes, we have had 5 years of positive change. Our services are working better. The city is safer and more productive to everybody. And that if you need help in Seattle, we have an answer for any form of help you need. And we're doing the best to actually provide that.
Oh, one thing that came up in our previous interview, we'll run it by you. Hockey's coming. Should basketball come? And if basketball comes, what's the city council to do about it?
So I absolutely want basketball back. I'm a huge sports fan. I see the value of having all the major sports teams here just from a pride in the city standpoint. One of the things I've noticed with professional athletes, you add another dozen millionaires to the city, they give back. They're part of that community. And so the city council, I think should be a huge supporter of getting the NBA back here and in a way that benefits the city. You know, it's like if we're going to build a new structure, then you should have, you know, cleanup of the neighborhood that comes with it. You should have economic development that comes with it. You should have added security in that neighborhood that comes with it. You know, no matter where you end up putting a new basketball facility, or if it's, you know, doing something with Key Arena, I want to see the team come back, and I want to see the deal, whatever we strike with whoever is the private group that's doing that, to be something that's beneficial for all of the people of Seattle and for them as well. I mean, you know, if you're going to bring a sports franchise here, it should be beneficial for everyone. But I absolutely do want the NBA back. I miss the Sonics.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.